Good evening. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It is a pleasure to share my internship experience with you. I was an intern in paintings conservation at the Mauritshuis for 6 months, September of 2013 through February 2014. This internship was part of my graduate education at Buffalo State. After 2 years of coursework in Buffalo, my program requires an additional 12-month internship, which I completed at 2 institutions, the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, and of course, the Mauritshuis. What made my experience at the Mauritshuis truly remarkable was not the amazing collection of old master paintings or the access to the latest analytical techniques. What made my experience spectacular were my colleagues, so I want to begin by thanking them. Not only were they generous with their knowledge and expertise, but they became my cultural ambassadors, my travel guides, and my dear friends. Clockwise from the top left, you see here Sabrina Maloney, paintings conservator and my main supervisor during my internship. Maria Albrecht, who is a conservation student from the University of Amsterdam, completing her internship year, much like myself. Suzanne Smelt, paintings conservator working on contract for the Mauritshuis, Carol Potash, senior paintings conservator, and Petria Noble, then the head of the conservation department, although she's since taken a job at the Rijksmuseum. As you may have deduced already, the Mauritshuis was actually closed for renovations during my internship, so I mostly worked off-site at several other locations. But I did get a hard hat tour of the building, including the new expansion, and I also had the opportunity to work inside the building when we surface cleaned the ceiling painting by Lataster, which was one of the few works, or perhaps the only work not deinstalled for the renovations. My internship included a variety of responsibilities, which was excellent training for a museum conservator. I had the opportunity to serve as a courier for artwork on loan. In addition, I regularly checked the condition of about 100 paintings that were being exhibited at the Gemeente Museum in The Hague. However, I spent most of my time working on one big collaborative project, the treatment and research of the decorative paintings in the Golden Room of the Mauritshuis. Here you see the paintings in the room before they were deinstalled for the renovations in 2012. The Golden Room is the main reception room on the ground floor overlooking the pond. In 1704, a fire destroyed much of the building's interior, and between 1708 and 1718, the house was restored. As part of this restoration, around 1718, Giovanni Antonio Pellegrini was commissioned to create a scheme of decorative paintings for the Grand Room. Pellegrini was a Venetian artist who played a major role in originating the Venetian Rococo style and spreading it throughout Europe. He spent most of his career outside of Italy, working in England, Austria, France, Germany, Belgium, and of course the Netherlands. Prior to this project, little research had been done on his painting technique or materials. The Golden Room is the only known painting ensemble by Pellegrini to have survived in situ in the Netherlands. As an integral part of the Golden Room's decorative scheme, the paintings have long been considered a part of the building. In fact, they were not accessioned into the collection until 2003, and as such, we have very little documentation on them or their history. As far as we know, the only other time these paintings have left the Mauritshuis was during World War II, when the collection was evacuated for safekeeping. In 2012, the paintings were removed from the building to ensure their safety during the renovations. This provided the perfect opportunity to treat and research the paintings while they were off display. This is what the Golden Room looked like when I first saw it in the fall of 2013. The ensemble is made of 15 paintings, 3 ceiling paintings, 2 chimney paintings, one of which is signed by the artist, 4 grisailles depicting the 4 elements, and 6 round paintings or tondos depicting decorative flower arrangements. While I helped with all of the paintings, my main project was researching these flower tondos. I spent most of the first month of my internship helping finish the treatments of the 3 ceiling paintings and 2 chimney paintings. This was a great chance to practice my in-painting skills. I also helped with varnishing, which even involved a couple field trips to observe varnishes on other ceiling paintings. This gave us a better idea of the type of varnish we wanted to use. We wanted to maintain a light and airy quality in the ceiling paintings, so we chose a slightly matte finish. However, with the chimney paintings, we wanted to saturate those very deep dark shadows, so we chose a glossier varnish for them. After the treatments were completed, we packed the paintings for safe storage until they can be reinstalled in the spring. The 4 grisailles were each treated by a different intern, and I treated the last one in the set, Air. My treatment included removing a very discolored old varnish and some old, mismatched retouching. Here you see the painting with the varnish partially removed. I also helped varnish all 4 paintings, and here they are after treatment. The paintings were reinstalled in March before the reopening of the Mauritshuis in June of 2014. As I mentioned earlier, though, my main project was researching the 6 flower paintings. Although structurally stable, the paintings are in very poor aesthetic condition. They are obscured by a very dark discolored old varnish layer, and there are numerous old paint losses. And the backgrounds are nearly entirely overpainted with a flat, dark gray color. Their poor condition has brought their authorship into question. They don't really seem to fit into the rest of the ensemble or with Pellegrini's work in general. Beginning this project, I had several questions I wanted to answer. What were these paintings supposed to look like? Were they painted at the same time as the rest of the Golden Room? Are they part of the original scheme or a later addition? Were they even painted by Pellegrini? Can we restore them? Can we make them look more like they did originally? And what is containing the flowers? You'll notice there's no visible pot or vase. The flowers just seem to float in midair above this ledge. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have much documentation on these paintings, and we have no records of previous conservation treatment. But we can deduce some of the previous treatment just by examining the paintings. The 6 tonneaux, like all of the Golden Room paintings, have been wax-lined. That is, the original canvas has been adhered to a newer canvas with a wax-based adhesive to provide additional support. The canvases have been stretched onto newer expandable stretchers, likely dating to the 20th century. And all of them have completely overpainted backgrounds, which of course raises some suspicion. One of the more interesting things I discovered when examining these paintings was the presence of a gold-colored metal leaf. It was first observed along the edges where the frame had abraded the paint layers, and I thought that the gold from the painting's gilded frame had just rubbed off onto the painting's surface. However, as I began to examine the paintings more closely under magnification, I found that this metal leaf was present throughout all 6 paintings. The metal leaf was usually found below the final paint layers and mostly visible through losses in that paint layer. It also seemed to be accompanied invariably by a transparent green material. Infrared imaging revealed an unusual grid pattern. The squares are approximately the same size as a sheet of standard metal leaf. Could it be that the paintings originally had a gilded background? Perhaps this was the artist's original intent. These 2 examples were found at Haus Schalenburg, another historic home in The Hague. It is located just across the water from the Mauritshuis, and although we don't know the date or the author of these paintings, it seems very plausible that there was some influence here. In order to learn more about the materials and techniques used in the 6 tonneaux, I collected paint samples from 4 of the paintings. Today I'll be discussing the samples from just one of the paintings, as my findings were consistent across all of the paintings sampled. I collected a sample near the edge where I had first observed the metal leaf peeking out beneath the paint layers. What you see here are two fragments from the same sample. Underneath this bottom layer is where the canvas would lie. This thicker layer with a variety of pigment sizes and colors is the ground or preparation layer. This thin, very even, bright layer is the metal leaf, and the dark material you see above and below it is the transparent green material. In this sample, you can also see the metal leaf clearly surrounded by the green material. This white paint layer above it is the top paint layer, which in this case corresponds to one of the flowers. Above that, we have a few layers of varnish and some surface grime. Next, I chose a sample from the empty area beneath the flowers in the hopes of finding some clue about a container or vase for the flowers. But all I found here was the ground layer, the metal leaf surrounded by the green material again, and a varnish layer on top. No vase. The last sample from this painting was from an area in the center with no visible metal leaf. I thought perhaps the metal leaf had not been applied in the areas where it was just going to be painted over with flowers. But we did find it here after all. It's not as clearly visible as in the other cross sections, but you can clearly see the dark green material between the ground and the paint layers. I concluded that the metal leaf had probably been applied to the entire surface after the ground layer was applied, but before the flowers were painted. This is a simplified schematic of the structure, but I still had a lot of questions to answer. What kind of metal was this? If it was gold leaf, why was it in such poor condition? If it was another metal, could it be a copper alloy? And was the green material something applied intentionally, perhaps as a mordant to help the metal leaf adhere? Or was it just a degradation product? To help answer these questions, we turn to our partners and sponsors on the Pellegrini project, Royal Dutch Shell. We took our samples up to the Shell Technology Center in Amsterdam to do some analytical work with the help of research scientist Rolf Haswell. The technique we chose was a scanning electron microscope with energy dispersive X-ray analysis. And here I am looking very sciencey next to the microscope. In a nutshell, this technique allows us to pinpoint a very small spot on the surface of our sample and decipher the chemical elements present. We took it a step further and scanned the entire surface of our samples so we could map out where each element was found throughout the cross-section. The black and white images here are backscatter images, in which the higher the density of a material, the lighter the color. And here you see the metal leaf appears quite light as it's a denser material. A scan for copper revealed high concentrations of the element in the metal leaf layer, as well as some lower concentrations surrounding the metal in the green material. Scanning for zinc also revealed high concentrations in and near the metal leaf. The ratio of zinc and copper is consistent with a brass alloy, and it seems the green material surrounding it is likely to be a degradation product of the brass reacting with the oil binder in the adjacent paint layers. We also made an unexpected discovery. I noticed the ground layer in my samples had some unusual and very distinct pigment particles. These particles were large, angular, and translucent, and they were consistently surrounded by a cluster of very fine orange particles. They mainly contained silica, calcium, magnesium, and iron, suggesting these are earth pigments. Curiously, we found the same distinct particles in the ground layers of the ceiling paintings and chimney paintings from the Golden Room, suggesting all of the paintings were made around the same time. Of the 15 paintings, only the 4 Grisailles had a different ground. Pellegrini often lets his ground layer show through in his paintings, so the choice of ground here was probably very intentional on the artist's part. So we concluded the flower tundas were painted at the same time as the rest of the Golden Room ensemble. But were they painted by Pellegrini? it was time to look at the artist's painting technique. By closely observing the other paintings in the Golden Room ensemble, and traveling to Venice and Paris to see other works by Pellegrini, his style of painting became more and more clear and distinct. Pellegrini painted quickly, with larger brushes, usually in just one layer, with vivid but very precise brush strokes, often defining an entire shape in just one stroke. We also discovered that he repeatedly used a zigzag brush stroke, present in nearly all of his paintings, a signature brush stroke, if you will. We find it twice here and here. All of these characteristics were also found in the flower tondos, most notably that signature zigzag, which you see here, and here's another example. So, putting together all of these puzzle pieces, we came to the conclusion that the flower tondos were painted at the same time as the rest of the ensemble, and most likely painted by Pellegrini. But their current appearance is very different from the sparkling metallic background and bright colors they would have had originally. At this point, they barely represent the artist's vision. We did some small cleaning tests, but quickly came to the conclusion that we could not safely clean them without risking further damage. And should we remove the varnish and overpaint, there was still extensive losses to the metal leaf and the paint. Reintegrating these losses in an ethical and stable way was a huge challenge. Since the paintings are structurally stable as they are, we decided not to treat them for the time being. Unfortunately, as often happens with this type of project, not all of my questions were answered, and I ended up with some new questions as well. I would really like to know if the degradation of the metal leaf was just inherent to the materials, or was it somehow augmented by exposure to increased moisture or some other chemical either found in the atmosphere or applied by humans? Is there anything we can do to slow down this degradation? And I still don't know if there's some sort of container for the flowers. I never figured that out. My research led to a poster which I presented at a conference hosted by the Center for Art Technological Studies and Conservation in Copenhagen in June of 2014, and a paper presented in Vienna at the International Congress for Chemistry of Cultural Heritage in July of 2014. As part of my internship, I was also highly encouraged to travel, and every other week I had one day off to visit other museums. During my internship year, I visited 18 conservation labs and over 100 museums and historic monuments in 35 cities across 10 countries. I also attended 2 workshops and 5 conferences. During most of my travel, I was seeking out old master paintings, and it has really helped me develop an eye for the aesthetic nuances in these old paintings, and perhaps even more importantly, in how a conservator's work can affect those aesthetics. It was a bit of a whirlwind and a lot of fun, but I also found that it really helped me prepare for the job that I have today. I'm currently the assistant conservator at the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Florida. The skills I learned during my internship at the Mauritshuis have been invaluable in my job at the Ringling. The museum has a tremendous collection of old master paintings. If you are ever in Florida, please do stop in and say hello. I will gladly give you a tour of the museum. I want to end by thanking my conservation colleagues and supervisors again, and all of the Mauritshuis staff who were so kind and welcoming. And of course, a very special thank you to the American Friends of the Mauritshuis for making this all possible. My internship was a life-changing and career-making experience, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. My email address is at the bottom of the screen. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.